Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, May 13, 2019. This is the Transportation Omnibus Conference Committee. I'd like to welcome everybody here this afternoon. We have an agenda. I'm going to alter it just a little bit while we're going to have some copies of some documents made. So I think I'll reverse it just a little bit. And I'd like to talk about the Deputy Registrar reimbursement bill to begin with. That is a bill that is a direct result of the problems that we've been having for the last year and a half or so or more regarding the Minlars matter. And we have put our deputy registrars in a very, very difficult position, at least by my estimation. The Senate, I think approximately a month ago, passed the deputy registrar bill off the Senate floor, and I believe the deputy registrar reimbursement bill is now hung up in the House. I'm not exactly sure where it's at, but that's an issue that I think should move, and I think it should move independently of the transportation omnibus bill or any other bill. I think that we ought to bring that to the floor and vote on it and get that money to the folks who we, the state of Minnesota, have really harmed. And I don't see it moving, and it causes me some concern. So I did want to bring that up. And if any of the conferees decide they want to weigh in on it, but I just wanted to put that out there, that it is an issue that is of grave concern to me, and I just don't see it moving, and I don't understand why. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Chair Newman and committee members. Thank you for bringing this up. This is a huge concern to me. This bill was over a month ago, was passed in the Senate. It was a 60-6 vote. These deputy registers has been proven. Everybody knows they've been harmed. They are still sitting out there. This was released on July 24th, 2017. We are coming up on 2 years. These deputy registers have been fighting with this system software, which we've been proven by the OLA, by Rick King, by several others, understand this thing is broken, was broken. Reduce the amount of transactions that these private businesses were able to complete. They often had times workarounds. They had to do 3 processes for one and only got paid for one. These are small businesses who've been harmed, who've had to borrow against their 401k, take out home equity loans, dip into their reserves. Everybody sitting here knows it. The state knows it. And why we cannot get this bill. I've talked to the governor on it. He agrees with me. He came to my hometown to see what's going on. He agrees with it. We need to do this. Why it's being held up in the House, I don't know. If it's a bargaining chip, shame on us or shame on you or shame on whoever. But we have to get this thing passed. We cannot get it taken up in these last days of horse trading or whatever it may be, or swapping. We just need to get these deputy registers as relief. I've spent countless hours in committee meetings with stakeholders. We went through language. They gave, we gave. There's indemnification language in there that hold them harmless, that hold us harmless. This is a one-time appropriation. We've capped it. I know the House is at 10 million, where the Senate's at 13 million. There's been runs on both of these. I know the governor and some others are concerned about some of the indemnification language, but I believe this holds us. If they take this money, they are saying that they will not hold the state harmless in any other dollar amounts. And all they're asking in return is, if they take the money, that the state will back them up if there was a mistake based on the software or language or a phone conversation that was done between DPS and the deputy registers. Do workarounds so they're not held liable for anything that might have hurt them. I just really think that it's a shame that we cannot get this bill forward. I would ask everyone here to please let the House hear this, get this thing signed or to a conference committee, work out the differences and get this out of the big bill and get them relief. So with that, I would ask for your support to somehow get this bill. It was Senate File 621. It's been off the Senate floor for almost a month and a half. And I guess I'm just looking for any reason why we can't get this forward. So thank you, Chair Newman.
Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Jasinski. I just wanted to make sure that we're all very clear with, as we discuss this. I've talked over the last week probably to two dozen deputy registrars, and their situation is horrible, and I feel really bad for them for the position that they're in, and really appreciate where they're coming from and why, and the fact that we at the legislature have to do something about this. I would be remiss, however, if I did not make sure to point out that the House has passed $10 million worth of deputy registrar money, and we passed that along in House File 861. We passed that along with our MNLARS money at the same time. The Senate stripped that $10 million for deputy registrars out of that bill. So we had it passed, we had it through, it was going, and it was part of that, and it should have passed at the same time with that. It would have been the very first bill that the governor signed, but it got pulled out in the Senate for reasons that I don't understand or know what was going on with that as well. So we have passed that, and now that we're at the point where we're at today and not knowing what sort of revenues we've got coming in for an entire bill, it makes it really difficult to look at everything as a big picture and have $10 million in there. So we have passed that bill, and we did pass that $10 million for deputy registrars right off the bat in the beginning of session, and so it was all going and it was all moving, and then it got pulled out by the Senate, and that is unfortunate, but that's where we're at today with it, and we have the $10 million in our House language, and so now we need to get the Omnibus bill to a place where we can all find a compromise on it and get it done and get it moving. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Jasinski, for bringing this issue forward. I'm not going to repeat my House speech from over a week ago when I tried to bring this issue forward by declaring an emergency and getting 621 passed and to the governor's desk. You've hit most of my points already. I'm not going to take more committee time to review those. I would just note that I've been trying to help these deputy registrars for a long time. We tried hard last year to pass the bill. We did pass it off the House floor. It was vetoed by the governor. We attempted a veto override, which was defeated again by the Democrats. This is a real issue that deserves attention, and people are standing in the way, and I don't really get it, but I do understand what these folks are going through, and it's about time we get something done.
Senator Dibble.
Well, Representative Torkelson knows exactly what I'm going to say. The bill that was passed last year was a false promise to the deputy registrars. It was taken out of driver services and vehicle services account. The governor said he well supported making the deputy registrars whole from general fund dollars. Those funds would have gutted the ability for the agency to operate. And so it was a false promise given to the DRs when that bill was passed, because he promised that veto ahead of time, and the legislature chose to proceed down that path anyways. So the failure of the legislature last year is squarely in the legislature's lap.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just responding to Representative Tabke, the reason that I know, number one, we didn't know what was going on at the time. They just kept putting more and more money into this. And the concern that I had as the Senate member was we had a bill at the same time for $13.1 million for MNLARS, and you add another $10 million or 13 in my case. When you go out to the public and saying you're putting $26 million into the system, that really concerns them. So we wanted to be clear that the $13 million was to fix MNLARS and the $13 million was for deputy registers, so we kept them separately. Because the average person out there, and as you as well as I know, going to your post office or grocery store, they see more money going into MNLARS and they say, whoa, 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 you can't do that anymore. They've had enough. They say no more. So the Senate's bill separated those, so people out there understood that 10 or 13 million, whichever dollar amount it was you wish to get behind, knew that it was for the deputy registers and not MNLARS, because the average person, and I'll say it 13 times, don't know the difference between MNLARS and deputy registers and where that money goes. So we were specific to do two separate bills, so people had no confusion why that they were, what the dollar amount was. So it wasn't 23 million or 26 million, it was separate, so have it out there and to get it there. And the indemnification language came in the process of that with the stakeholders versus their concerns of so many workarounds being done over the phone, not knowing 3 years from now what could happen. They just wanted to be held non-liable for something that they took the advice of someone on a phone of how to get around a certain transaction to get it fixed so they get it done. That's all they're asking for. In return, we negotiated, Senator Newman and myself, negotiated that if they take this money, they cannot come back against the state any other future time. So we believe that was a very, very fair trade-off that, you know, held us harmless just as well as them. So we worked hours and hours with stakeholders to come up with that, and I still believe it was very well supported by all the stakeholders. Senate was 60-6 on that we were in favor of doing that, and it just didn't get done. So I won't continue to go on and on. I'm just very frustrated because I see these people, I walk in that office once or twice a month to ask them how they're doing, and they're still really, I mean, the system is working now, you know, averagely, I'd say. I think most people hear that now that it does work. They've pretty much figured out what they can and can't do, and they've just chosen to do those workarounds or to figure what they can and can't do. But not only are we going to ask them to change another system in probably 18 months from now to go to again, so I just think it's all the more reason we get this bill separated off and get these deputy registers. And I know we all want, I really do. It's just the part that frustrates me is just the process of why it's being delayed for them. So I understand your concerns as well, but I really think that if we can somehow get this to the governor's desk, he will sign it, either if it's 10 or 13, I don't care. Obviously, I prefer the 13, but one way or another, we need to get this thing resolved and let them move on with their lives and their business. So thank you again.
I don't see any other members that want to chime in at this point, so I'll recognize Chairman Hornstein for some final thoughts, and then I'll have a couple final comments on it.
Sure.
Chairman Hornstein.
Thank you, Chair Newman, and I very much appreciate you raising this issue today. It's critically important, it's urgent, and I share Senator Jasinski and Representative Tabke's concerns as well as Representative Torkelson's in terms of making sure we get this done, and we get this done in these next few waning days of the session. And, you know, we can go back and forth. I think, you know, both parties can make a case, you know, one or the other causing the delay. And we passed that bill February 28th with the $10 million in it. But I'm awaiting our target, and I know that two items for sure that the chair and I agree on, whether this bill is incorporated in a more of a global agreement or travel separately. We are in agreement about this, as well as the support for the new VITARS system. And those are going to be probably an important chunk of our target. So I'd like to get this done one way or the other this session. It should get done. I think moving forward, we also have some additional fees in House File 1555 moving forward for deputy registrars, because not only do they need and deserve to be reimbursed, but they will be facing expenses with the new system, and we need to make sure that those are, if we've learned anything from what's happened the last couple of years, let's try to be proactive and avoid the type of situation that's taken place to begin with. So we held hearings in the House, and I believe that Representative Elkins carried that bill, and you know, we have those additional fees, you know, prospectively for the deputy registrars. But important discussion, Mr. Chair, and I do think that we are in agreement, and one way or the other will either get $10 or $13 million. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Hornstein. And just a couple final comments. Members, thank you for the discussion. I brought it up really for the ears of the leadership in the Senate and in the House and the governor. I don't want them to forget. It's really kind of out of our hands at this point. I agree with Chairman Hornstein that this really is an important issue. And so hopefully the leadership in our respective bodies and the governor is hearing this discussion and will help us move it forward, as I believe all of us are interested in doing. So thank you very much for that. We will now, members, we're going to move towards looking at some same or similar provisions. And I believe in your packet, we'll start with a document. It says similar provisions for consideration May 13th, 2019, and it is dated May 13th, 2019, 12:19 PM. So that's the document that I am referring to. If any of you do not have that, please let us know, and we'll see that you get copies. We are going to make a little bit of a change. At one point, I thought we were going to proceed through this document and adopt, but we will not be voting on these today, but we are going to go through them. There's some additional requests that will be coming from the House side at the end of the presentation that will delay it, give us a chance to look at those additional requests, and then overnight we'll look at them. And it is my understanding that Chairman Hornstein would propose that we vote on these issues tomorrow. So to begin with, perhaps we could have counsel for the House and Senate walk us through the various provisions on page 1 and 2 of the document that I referred to. Looks like the Senate is the first provision, and so I'd have Ms. Stengel address that, and then Mr. Burris would be addressing the House versions. Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The first two sections have to do with the Metro Mobility data sharing. And as you recall, we talked about this before, very similar. One of the main differences was how the two were coded. And here proposes Senate sections 4 and 5 are adopted, and those are found on page R61 and then on R153. The next set of sections, Mr. Chair and members, have to do with the dedicated fund expenditure report. These are Senate Section 17 and 124 on R71 and R164. Senate Section 17 requires MnDOT and DPS to submit a report in every odd-numbered year that provides a list of expenditures and transfers in and out of the Trunk Highway Fund and the HUTDF. Section 124 is sort of an interim report. That's a one-time report that will be due in 2020, and then starting in 2021, it'll be every 2 years.
Mr. Burris.
Mr. Chair and members, the next item on that list is a House-only provision. This is found on pages R71 and R169 in the side-by-side language. That's House Sections 9 and 129. And that would authorize a turnback of Trunk Highway 156 in South St. Paul.
Mr. Chair and members, the next provisions are Senate Section 62 and Senate Section 66, found on R99 and R102. And both of these have to do with large vehicles and roundabouts, so things like semis and other similarly large vehicles. One section allows the large vehicle to deviate from a driving lane when approaching and going through a roundabout, and the other section talks about if two large vehicles drive through a roundabout at the same time, the driver on the right has to yield to the driver on the left.
And then, Mr. Chair and members, the next couple of sections are in the category of same and similars between the House and Senate. And the proposal would be to take the House language, which is sections 69 and 126. These both concern window tinting and who is able to operate a vehicle that's tinted. Both House and Senate identify a number of folks who could drive a tinted vehicle. The House language includes some additional individuals, grandchildren, as well as personal care attendants. And the main section is Section 69, and then there's an temporary implementing provision in Section 126. And then the next provision is a House-only provision. This is found on page R110. It is House Section 70. This is part of Department of Transportation policy-related proposals, and this would allow for towing of 2 trailers under some circumstances, so kind of 3-unit combinations, and it allows for adjustments to length and weight limits when inventory property is being transported by a manufacturer, distributor, or dealer. Let's see, and then, Mr. Chair and members, the next set of sections, 72 to 74, as well as part of a technical revisor instruction concerns an agricultural product special permit. And this is found on starting on page R112 and extending into the next couple of pages. And both House and Senate have this provision on identifying or citing a definition for qualifying agricultural products by listing a number of products. The proposal involving taking the House language would leave a couple of identified products out. So the House language does not include fertilizers and agricultural lime, which is included in the Senate language. And then there's some technical structural differences between House and Senate on that. The next provision is on page R131. This is another House-only provision, and it would allow for a hours of service exemption for intrastate transportation under some circumstances that involve movements of construction, utility construction materials within a 50-mile radius of a project site.
Mr. Chair and members, the next sections have to do with Senate language. Senate Section 93 on R134 is a Senate-only section. This requires the Commissioner of Public Safety to submit an annual report to the legislature on the revenue generated by the Vehicle Crimes Unit of the State Patrol. The next set of sections are Senate Sections 94 to 96 and 98 through 116, and then 142 paragraph C and 143. And you can see the corresponding revisor pages on the document, so I won't read all of those. But these are the airport zoning provisions that we went through the other day that talk about properties near airports and the process by which local governments can adopt zoning regulations to regulate those areas.
And Mr. Chair and members, the next sections 124 and 123, or 123 and 124, if I were to list them in order, are House-only provisions found on page R164. And this would extend a pilot program for community destination signs in 2 harbors. So the pilot program would be able to run for another 4 years, and the corresponding legislative report would be pushed out towards the end of that revised timeline.
Mr. Chair and members, the next 2 sections are Senate Section 126 and 127 on R165. These are Senate-only provisions that allow Minneapolis and Burnsville to adopt ordinances that prohibit jake braking on specified highways in the respective cities.
And then, Mr. Chair and members, the following section is found on page R168. This is House Section 128 as a House-only provision, and it would allow for a conveyance of a portion of state rail bank property, land conveyance.
And Mr. Chair and members, the final sections are Senate Section 130 and Senate Section 140 on R169 and R176. Section 130 is similar to a House provision, and that directs the Office of, I forget the exact title, but an office within the Bureau of Mediation Services to facilitate a discussion between the Met Council and the Calhoun Isles Condo Association in Minneapolis to talk about some issues relating to Southwest Light Rail. And Senate Section 140 has to do with a vibration study that would be conducted on the Calhoun Isles property. The next is Senate Section 128 on R170, and that's a Senate only, that's a similar provision between the House and Senate. Senate Section 128 requires the signs to be erected and requires MnDOT to use existing resources to do so. And the final section is Senate Section 142, paragraph E on page R177, and this repeals the expiration of the Mississippi River Parkway Commission.
Members, are there any questions or comments regarding the provisions that Senate and House Counsel have just gone through? Do you have any questions about anything? Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at, the agricultural product special permit. And I noticed that we took the House in this version, and as I look on R112, we're talking about eliminating the natural and commercial fertilizers, potash, agricultural lime, and so on. And I'm wondering why we're eliminating that. Is there good reason, and is there somebody here that could speak to that? I'm not from the rural area, but I just wonder why that's being eliminated.
I can answer that, very briefly.
Okay.
There, in the House version, it is a little bit more concise. There is a question regarding the fertilizer in particular in the Senate version that might have an adverse effect on some of our short line rural railroads, and that's why the difference.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussions from any members on what we have covered today? Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding that provision for the ag products, I have been doing some digging into it, and I'm sure you have too. It's a little more controversial than I thought it might be, but I think there may be room for some compromise, especially when it comes to the potential to haul manure and other natural products. And so I don't know what your plans are, Mr. Chair, if we could delay this for another day, or if you want to move ahead. I'm not necessarily dramatically opposed to moving ahead, but there's that provision, and then there's another provision that affects forest products that I'm still trying to get an answer from the interested parties in regard to that, so.
This might help you, Representative Torkelson. Originally, we had intended to vote on these today. We are going to delay the vote until tomorrow on all of these provisions because Representative Tabke has some questions he wants to bring up for us to look at overnight. And it would be then proposed or agreed by Chairman Hornstein and myself that we would vote on all of this tomorrow. So maybe we could just leave it lay for right now, and that'll give you time to address whatever you wish to. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that very much.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, then Chairman Hornstein, we will, in accordance with our earlier discussion, we will not vote on these measures today, but bring them up tomorrow. Is that agreeable for a vote?
Thank you, yes, Chair Newman. And I think there are, a number of provisions that, I've certainly identified that I think are not controversial that we could add to the list. And I don't know if it would be helpful to the committee to have, Mr. Burris go over some of those, or, you could study them overnight as well. But there are a number of House provisions that I think would be helpful for the committee to know about. And, they're not too many. It's not an extensive list.
And Chairman Hornstein, I can recognize either Mr. Burris or Representative Tabke, whichever wishes to essentially point out to us the sections that you want the Senate to consider overnight. Mr. Burris, do you have those sections in mind at this time? And if I understand correctly, Mr. Burris, you will be working off of a document, House File 1555, House Offer, May 11th, 2019, and the time date is May 11th, 2019, 3:43 p.m. Is that the correct document, Mr. Burris?
Mr. Chair and members, yes, that is correct. So that was a working document reflecting a House offer over the weekend.
And members, do you have that document in your packets and available to you? I'm not seeing any no's, so I'm assuming you have them. Okay. Chairman Hornstein.
I think Vice Chair Tabke was just interested in maybe having go through all of the ones that we had proposed that weren't included in this.
Chairman Hornstein, what I have in mind at this point isn't so much to discuss the items, it's to simply point out to us the sections that you want us to look at overnight. That's what I had in mind.
Okay.
Whoever wants to do it is fine with me, Representative Tabke or Mr. Burris. Just indicate to me who you want me to recognize. Representative Tabke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hornstein, Chair Hornstein has gone through and identified we, as House Conferees, had given an offer on Saturday with an extensive list of items that we thought were, for the vast majority, very non-controversial items that would have been agreed to relatively easily, with some more discussion and back and forth. But of those that we offered, Chair Hornstein has identified 6 different items, which I think Mr. Burris has now, just to go over and identify that we would like to have included in this list for a positive vote tomorrow.
Thank you, Representative Tabke. And Mr. Burris, what I'd be interested in is having you identify the sections that you want us to talk about. You do not have to explain them. Just identify them for us, please.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair and members, the first of these sections is on the weight limits for unfinished forest products, and this is a House Section 21. That's found on page R78. The second.
One moment, Mr. Burris. I'm looking at the House Transportation offer from May 11th. Could you direct us to what section you were talking about on that document?
Mr. Chair and members, this is line 21 of that document.
Okay. All right, please proceed.
Mr. Chair, if I could just take one moment to get a couple of things lined up together.
Certainly, go right ahead.
I think I'd be able to better walk you through the remaining items. Okay, moving through the rest of the list, Mr. Chair and members, this is all on page 2. These are all House-only sections. Line 22, House Section 34 on consular IDs for vehicle titling and registration. Then line 25, House Section 89, allowing for transit assistance for tribal governments. Line 26, House Section 92, a conditional appropriation to MnDOT for snow and ice costs adjustment. Line 29, House Sections 99 to 103, as well as Section 137, Paragraph A. This is a DPS initiative on ADA compliance and wheelchair securement. Then line 30, House Section 122, modifying the floodwood rest area maintenance requirements. And finally, line 33, House Section 131 on rail safety meetings regarding the Southwest LRT project.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. With that, we will go back and take another look at it. Just so that the record is clear, the Senate and the House did exchange offers over the weekend. The House took some of ours, and we took some of the House's requests. So it's a mutual negotiation at this point. And I will also go back and look at what we had offered the House and see if there's anything that possibly we missed. But thank you, Representative Tabke, for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we will consider those for tomorrow's hearing, Chair Hornstein. That's all I have at this point on that. There is an amendment I would like to address, Chairman Hornstein, regarding some provisions from last year's Omnibus bill. And I believe, members, in your packet, you have an A43 amendment. And to put that into perspective for you, these are items that were in the omnibus bill last year that we considered non-controversial and ultimately were vetoed. And I'm thinking it might be a good idea to pick these items up. They are not in either the House version or the Senate version of the transportation bill, but they are provisions that we have seen in the past. So with that, I will have Ms. Stengel walk us through the amendment and explain it, and then we'll take questions. Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Looking at the document with the number in the upper right-hand corner, SCH 15555A43. This has several sections relating to do with lighting on vehicles and a few other things, so I'll step through it briefly. On page 1 of the amendment, starting on line 5, you'll see a new section 64. And this has to do with strobe lamps on certain buses. And basically what it does is strikes the language and references a new subdivision, which we'll come to shortly. On line 11 of page 1, a new section 65 talks about supplemental warning systems and allows school buses to be equipped with the supplemental warning system as provided in one of the sections we'll come to shortly. Section 67, starting on line 18, has to do with school buses, and you'll see the actual change at the top of the next page. And the gist of this is that some of the restrictions on appearances don't apply to school buses operated by licensed child care providers if the lighting systems warning lighting systems have been deactivated. Section 69 starts on page 2, line 11. The first couple of paragraphs just have some sort of cleanup language, and you'll see at the bottom it talks about an alternative way to have identification on the bus. So the identification provisions in paragraph B that identify the bus in 2-inch black letters on the side of the bus, those sorts of things won't apply if that school bus is equipped with a changeable electronic message sign on the rear of the bus that meets the requirements of this section. Section 70 starts at the top of page 3, and this is the provision that allows for the commissioner to approve school buses to be equipped with a supplemental warning system. And you'll see the requirements for those types of warning systems there. Section 71 starts on line 20 on page 3, and this strikes some existing language because it is replaced by some of the upcoming languages on different types of lighting. That takes us to page 4, line 4, and has to do, again, it strikes some language about glaring or dazzling lights because that is now covered in one of the upcoming sections. Section 74, line 11 on page 4 has to do with flashing and glaring lights. And this talks about, you'll see on line 22, stop lamps and signal lamps cannot project a glaring or dazzling light unless it meets certain requirements. On the top of page 5, there is a new section 75 about white lights. There's a general prohibition of projecting a white light to the rear of a vehicle when you're traveling on the roads of the highway, unless one of these exceptions are met. Section 76 on line 18 has to do with strobe lamps, and you'll see that the change is not actually, the meat of the change is not until the next page. The rest of it is cleaning up, getting rid of some redundant cross-references and changing language. You'll see the real change on line 11 and 12 on page 6, and this is updating the standards by which a vehicle is allowed to have a strobe lamp. On page 6, line 15, taking a step away from the school bus and vehicle lighting. This allows a person to have a restricted farm license to perform farm work within 40 miles of the farm instead of the current 20. And this applies regardless of how the family farm is organized. That takes us to page 7, and this is a legislative report for the Transportation Economic Development Program. And the changes on page 8, and basically what this does is if there's no money given to the TED program for 24 months, the report is not required. Section 140 requires the Commissioner of Public Safety to apply to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to waive provisions relating to people driving buses with no passengers for the purpose of delivering the bus to purchasers. And Section 147 has to do with North Star commuter rail operating costs and how there's an exemption here for reserve funds that are available to the Anoka County Regional Rail Authority that allows them to pay operating and maintenance of North Star commuter rail.
Members have any questions regarding the E43? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the matter of the restricted license for farm work, which starts on page 6, line 15, just trying to remember where we ended up on this discussion about continuing to restrict or exempt that 40-mile radius from cities of the first class. That's on line 6.30. I thought we had decided, I thought the Senjum Dibble Coalition had decided that it wasn't such a bad thing to allow these folks to venture into cities of the first class.
Senator Dibble, I do remember that conversation. I don't remember how it ultimately turned out. But I can tell you that I believe that what you are looking at is what ultimately was in our omnibus bill last year. I just don't remember the conversation about allowing farm trucks to come into the cities of the first class, except that I know we talked about it. That's the best I can, that's the best answer I can give you, except what you are looking at is what we ultimately included last year.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
So will we have,
Senator Dibble.
thank you, Mr. Chair, will we have opportunity for further discussion on the matter tomorrow before we adopt this amendment?
Certainly. I
All
mean, we're not going to vote on this or the others. If there's further discussion that you want to have, I would think Chairman Hornstein will entertain that, those issues.
Right.
I would ask just members to keep in mind that what Chairman Hornstein and I are trying to do with these provisions is simply pull out from what was there last year and include it so we can get it passed. I don't know that we really had in mind to take testimony or make any significant changes, but rather just pass non-controversial issues. That's what we really had in mind. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm getting a text from the audience that the A43 is not available to the observers of the committee. Can more copies be made available per chance? All right, thanks.
And, Mr. Chair, I think, there might be some additional things in the, from the omnibus bill last year that aren't included in the amendment that I think we'd also like the Senate to consider, and I'll pass those on to you as well today, later today.
That's fine. And this amendment, I apologize if copies are not available to the public. I can't tell you why. I kind of thought there would be, but it's not going to be voted on today, and we will make sure the copies are available. Best I can do at this point. Any other comments? Chair Hornstein.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I wasn't sure if there would be testimony, so I did want to acknowledge several people from the Calhoun Isles Condominium Association that are here, and they have left some written testimony that I think we could just, if we could pass out or include in the record. I'm glad we'll be taking their testimony into consideration, and I'm glad, and I appreciate, Mr. Chair, you're including that in our package that we'll be approving tomorrow. So wanted to acknowledge your work and that you're here, but again, we're not taking, again, testimony on these individual items today, but we do have this.
Yeah. And Chair Hornstein, I have no objection to making this letter available to the members. I'd like to welcome the folks from the Calhoun Isles again, and I do remember you coming into the Transportation Committee, I think twice, and got to testify the second time. So again, I want to thank you for that. But because we've already had a full hearing on this issue, I would not anticipate taking any further testimony at this time. Any other discussion on the A43 amendment? Seeing none, we will lay that amendment over and pick it up again tomorrow. Is there any other discussion? Chair Hornstein, do you want to talk? We're just about at the end of our agenda. Do you want to talk about tomorrow?
Yeah, so tomorrow, members, thank you, Chair Newman. So tomorrow, we'll take up the proposal that we have before us, hopefully with a couple of additional provisions. And that would also include the amendment that includes items from last year's Omnibus bill. What's contained in the amendment, again, possibly a couple of other items that the House might be bringing forward. And then after that, I think a lot of our work in terms of policy issues, same and similar, will be concluded. And we can start to get into some of the more challenging issues that we have between us. And I look forward to and welcome that discussion and appreciate, again, the good camaraderie we've had on both sides of the aisle up till now in this committee, Mr. Chair. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Seeing no further matters on the agenda, we are adjourned.